Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Headmaster's Homeroom. I am Lady Hamilton. I am so excited to have you guys tonight, and I'm extremely excited for our guests that I'm going to introduce you to shortly. You guys know how much I care about us. The whole reason of this podcast that we've been doing is because my producer was able to give me an avenue to help each other know that we are here in this together, and to show you avenues from great authors to artists to people who are starting things in their communities to people who are running for office. Just knowing that there are so many of us out there that are doing great things that care about us and our health. And you guys know how much I care about our health as I dedicate our Sunday shows to exactly that, how to cook well and how to eat healthy, and even bring in nurses and stuff to make sure that we know more about our situation. Well, we all know that 2020 sure did change everything, didn't it? And there's just been so much misinformation and misguidance and, lack of support and completely ruined our confidence in some of the best people that we can rely on. So our guest tonight, I'm so excited to introduce you to him because I'll tell you something, coming with a husband who's a nurse and having to deal with this situation firsthand and seeing all the things that he's going through, I really love it when people are bringing this awareness, bringing these truths, and bringing this understanding to us. So I hope you guys all get your coffee. I'll get settled in because we're about ready to go to school tonight and learn some amazing information that can help you, help your family members. And it's a pleasure. So with that being said, I have this amazing bio I want to read and a wonderful quote that I'm going to finish it with. But I am so pleased to have Dr. Michael Schwartz on with us tonight. So Dr. Michael J. Schwartz has been an entrepreneur since 1993. He owns and operates 3 medical clinics, both in New Jersey and in Florida. His company was the first in New Jersey to start conducting the COVID-19 testing. In his book, Fauci's Fiction, he tells the story of COVID-19 in real time and includes anecdotal stories and personal experiences we can all relate to. The book also explains what a virus is, how testing works, and how the rush to vaccinate everyone in the world may not have been an excellent idea. In this compelling and eye-opening book, you'll discover the natural science behind COVID-19 and what the media and the government kept from you. This work examines metadata from over 19,000 patients receiving over 44,000 tests, incorporating the data from antibodies and vaccines to paint an honest picture of what COVID-19 looks like from the 30,000-foot view. And let me switch over because there is a quote that I absolutely love from Dr. Schwartz. It says this, and I quote, "Listen to the talking heads on television about the new emerging threat of a fresh pandemic out of China makes it clear that the world hasn't learned anything from the last pandemic. We have so much data from COVID-19 that it has been taught us how to diagnose and treat appropriately. Still today, the masses don't know what viruses are and how they're spread. It's as if the government and media would rather spread fear and confusion than educate the population. We are more than ready to face whatever the world throws at us." And that is from Dr. Michael J. Schwartz. I am absolutely honored to introduce you, and we're going to be talking about his great new book. So let's welcome Dr. Schwartz.
Hey, how are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for being on my show. It's a wonder to have you.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Well, I'll tell you something. So I got the privilege of starting this podcast because I was usually a guest on the show, and I have a nationwide online private school. So education, and with my husband being a nurse, health is so vital to us. And I lived through this, and was sick and was sent home from, school, but they still didn't quite know. I was at Columbia, still didn't quite know what was going on when this was going around and sent everybody home. But living with a husband in the nursing field, I got to see this pretty close up to what was happening. And it was just a mess. I was luckily able to read most of your book. Like I said, I'm a little busy and I can't wait to read the rest of it. But especially your introduction was so drawing to me too. And I don't know if you have time, I can always read that as well. But what a wonderful book. So I look forward to you telling us more and taking us to school tonight, Dr. Schwartz.
Sure. Yeah. And I appreciate that. The introduction, obviously, is about my dad because my dad passed away this year was February 13th of 2023. And, I have my suspicions about why, and it probably had something to do with the vaccine, because the symptoms that he had and after the autopsy was done, a lot of the things that he had were things that we see commonly from people that are having adverse reactions to the vaccine. But we could chat about that later.
Yeah, well, I completely understand that. My mom died in 2020 in May, and she already had congestive heart failure. So again, just speculating on situations, but we know the number one kind of side effect to this was heart disease and heart clotting and heart problems. And I couldn't even get there fast enough. It was a matter of a week and she was gone. So we seem to, have a lot of these issues. But one of the biggest concerns I definitely saw with my husband and now my current doctor is the fact that, doctors especially, we've lost a lot of confidence in that. But then, they've lost a lot of confidence in their same field here, especially when they're giving out something. And whether you take it or not, the problem is there was no insert, there was no ingredients, there was no nothing. So they didn't even know how to counteract this and identify patient by patient, because we're not all one size fits all. And it's still a concern today when you see something that's out there and you don't have all the facts or go through all the testing to be able to counteract any disease. And I know that you even brought up like even cancer, because one cancer for one patient is totally different than another cancer for somebody else. So
yeah, sure. A couple things there. I mean, you're absolutely right. The nation, the world, I mean, especially here in the US, we've lost faith in the CDC. We've lost faith in the government and our doctors. There's a lot of doctors who didn't show up, or a lot of doctors who shut their doors when COVID happened. And just when the public needed them most. I don't know how far you got in the book, but we kind of bifurcated. I talk about it in different segments because I wanted to give people the understanding that the 30,000 foot view of our perspective first and where we were. We were the first company to do a COVID test in New Jersey. I was it. And it was kind of scary. We were like on an island. I think you in Hawaii by chance?
No, my producer is. I'm in Virginia. So we're from coast to coast here.
All right. I was getting a little jealous because I'm in New Jersey and it's getting cold over here. But in New Jersey, when COVID started, I like to kind of set it up here, but we had been doing COVID swabs for years. My patients knew what COVID swabs were before any of the public did, because if you had come to us 5 years ago and you were sick, we were going to swab you. It's called a respiratory pathogen panel. We've been using it for years. It's something, and it really kind of all stems back to that. I talk about it now to this day. The old way of practicing medicine, and a lot of medicine, as you know, is practice. It's guessing. It's a practice. All right. And there's no faulting doctors in trying things and practicing, but we have the ability to diagnose these things appropriately. And doctors sometimes are too short. There's no money in primary care. So a lot of doctors will tell you, I got 7 minutes with a patient. I have to rush through to make any money. Mm-hmm. Now you want me to swab, you want me to fill out a form, send the sample off to the lab, check the portal tomorrow. They don't want the responsibility and the time to have to do that and go through the motions. But we talk to doctors all the time about respiratory pathogen panels before COVID existed, about appropriately diagnosing things. And the reason is 41 million antibiotics are written every year. 23 million are unnecessary. So you get a lot of antibiotic resistance by practicing the wrong way. You're writing an antibiotic for a virus, which is not going to do anything, and then the patient stops taking it. There's just too many variables. So respiratory pathogen panel really comes into play. And if you play out COVID from beginning to end, we're having the same exact problem now. There's a lot of doctors who haven't learned anything. So we add these respiratory pathogen panels, and we work with a lab at the time in Virginia, who was one of the first 30 labs in the country to get FDA approval to do testing. That's why we were the first. So when I had the samples in office and we got it approved, we kind of hit the ground running, and all of a sudden I put one post up, and the next thing you know, my phone's ringing off the hook and we're running out of samples. And this happened for weeks and weeks and weeks until the labs did something ingenious. It was kind of neat. They created their own medium. They validated buccal swabs. That's why the swabs were a little bit larger at one time. I think if you remember, you probably weren't getting swabbed every day, but there were people in the nursing homes that we did swab every single week. And there was a time period where they were like, yeah, these swabs are a little bigger. And we're like, no, they're the same, but they were a little bit bigger, which was uncomfortable. But there's a timeline that we went through. And I think the biggest point of the book is that we knew what we knew very early on. It was March, April. By May of 2020, we had enough patient load that we were able to say this thing is not as deadly as they're saying on TV. There's no need for lockdowns and school closures and all this nonsense, but no one would listen. And there's reasons behind all this, which we can discuss.
Yeah, please do, because I know that. I mean, it's one of the reasons I started a school. I was working in the public system, and I'm watching everything get completely shut down, and that, and just also saw. I mean, on the side, I saw the years and decades of the kids being behind. But I'm like, we could do better. That was my point. During a pandemic, we could have done better, than what we did. And then what I saw with my husband too, he did work in a nursing home. That's why I was kind of chuckling, because I do remember him even saying something about his patients saying that the swabs had gotten bigger. But this is just in your book, and I got through the vaccines area, and there's some amazing stories, especially about your 22-year-old, because you just hate to hear about the youth. You really do. But that's as far as I got. But it's just a great book. But if you would love to continue more, because you're right, there's things that we did know and things that could have been handled better. And like you said too, with the doctors, why in the world, you said this in your book, why in the world would you shut down when the patients needed you the most?
Yeah, they were scared. I mean, they were scared, and I watched it firsthand. A lot of doctors who were clients of mine on the lab side who were scared. They were wearing masks. They were shutting down, saying, we don't want to bring this home to our families. Meanwhile, we're literally, that's all we did. I mean, we did COVID nonstop for 3 years. Our entire office just changed into a COVID center. And it wasn't just that. And the reason we have so much data is because we were doing tests at police departments, school districts, nursing homes, assisted livings. And these were people who were required to test weekly. When you test the same 100 cops every single week, you learn a lot, because you find out a couple things. And you read the chapter on testing. That's probably the most interesting thing that the public doesn't understand. And we would give this dissertation to each single patient every time they came in the office. Most people today don't know the difference between isolation and quarantine. And I bring that up. It's kind of semantics, but people will look at you and go, well, they're the same. And I said, no, it's not. And when I call a patient and say, hey, you're positive, and they say on the phone, and you got to understand, I've had this conversation 4,000 times, and they say to me, oh, I need to quarantine. I say, no. What did the astronauts do when they came back from the moon? They quarantined in case they were exposed to something. You isolate when you're positive. And the reason I bring that up, and it sounds so simple, if I realized very early on that if we weren't on the exact same page with language in this country, we were never going to get through this, because one person's saying one thing and someone else is speaking in a totally different language, whether it came to vaccines or testing or what have you. So still to this day, people don't understand timelines of viruses. The incubation period for COVID is 3 to 5 days. So I tell people, by the time you walk in my office, you've had it about day 4. Okay. That's when you start feeling symptoms, if you get any symptoms. The virus itself can only sustain in your system for 14 days. So that's why we isolate you for 10 at the end of the day. The end of those 14 days, you're at the end of the life cycle of the virus. There was no need to keep coming back and test. And we dealt with that for many, many months, where people would come in and say, I need a negative test to go back to work. No, you don't. And I would always tell them, do you go back to the doctor when you have the flu to ask if you're over the flu? And they'd kind of look at me and say, well, that makes sense. But we were handling this like a different, aura. Meanwhile, it's very simple. So timelines is important. Language is important. Testing is probably the most important. And I explain to people COVID like this. COVID is not just negative or positive. You are either negative or you're positive, with caveats. And those caveats are very, very important. The first one has to do with testing your viral load. That's what we've had. You've heard of course, PCR testing, polymerase chain reaction testing. A lot of people think it doesn't work. It does. And I can show you that we've had repeatable data over and over again to show you it does work. What PCR testing does is it finds a signal and it amplifies it hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of times. So basically what I explain to patients is that looking for COVID at level 1 is like looking for COVID on my cell phone, but looking for COVID at level 36 is like looking for COVID in the solar system. That's because the testing sensitivity is logarithmic, not linear. And I don't want to get too sciencey for your audience, but it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes 1, 10 times sensitivity, 100 times, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million, 100 million, billion, and so on to level 36. That's as far as the lab goes in their cycles. So when you're looking for COVID that minute at level 36, you only need 9 copies of a virus to tell me it's in your system and bound. But the higher you go up on that CT scale, that's the lower your viral load is. So if you come in between a level 27 and 36, you are not going to have a symptom. That is at least what we've seen in our data set. And people, it's funny. I still have the same conversation. We're almost 4 years into this now, and I can't believe that. People will say to me, "Oh, I've never had COVID," and I said, "Well, you probably had it." And they say, "No, I would know." And I say, "What do you mean?" They say, "Well, I would have symptoms." And I said, "Well, actually, 90% of my positive patients were asymptomatic. 90%. That's a huge portion. It was only 10 to 15% that had any classical symptoms. Because people would say to me, about symptomology, they'd say, well, I'd have a cough or a fever or something. I said, what do you mean? Like, the most common symptom of COVID is a headache, and it has to do with hemoglobin uptake issues. And then you get fatigue and all. When a virus replicates in your system, bacteria, same thing, but virus, really, when it replicates to the point where it destroys the mitochondria of your cells, that's when you are going to start to develop classical symptoms. Okay. If it settles in your lungs and you start getting a cough or a fever, your body's fighting it off. But when you have such a minute amount of viral load, you wouldn't have a classical symptom at all. And the majority of the people, as I mentioned, were asymptomatic, but the ones who did have a classical symptom, usually they had a co-infection. Now, you would only know that, Lady Hamilton, if you were doing a respiratory pathogen panel, which there are 31 things on. So the ones who I'd call on the phone and say, "How you feeling?" And they're going, "Yeah, I'm not feeling so well." So, "Well, you have COVID and staph." I had a guy 2 years ago, I read about him in the book, who had COVID, staph, H flu, and RSV all at the same time. And so perspective is very important. If you can imagine that guy walking into a Walgreens and getting a home test thinking he had COVID, he would have thought it was the worst thing in the world, but he was sick from the RSV and the H flu. And you would only know that by doing proper testing. And here we are 4 years later. I walk into doctor's offices still, and they still have the same mentality. I don't want to fill out a form, and I don't want to, send in a sample and check a portal. They'll always ask about reimbursements. There were no reimbursements for doctors for doing testing, but it is the appropriate way to diagnose a respiratory pathogen.
Right. Right. And, that's really interesting that doctors don't want to do that. But it's so important too. And then how many things got labeled? Like you said, you might have several other things, but how, if you came through with positive with COVID, it was COVID. Forget that you had anything else. It was COVID. And I find that to be pretty alarming too, because you're like, like you said, it might have been a multiple amount of different things plus COVID. And I find that really interesting as well, and how many things got labeled as just that. So,
well, it's important.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. It's important to look at it in the totality of the circumstances from the, again, a 30,000 foot view. The three caveats to that are: what are your viral load? Do you have a co-infection, and do you have a comorbidity? And I have that data on every single 19,000 patients that we have. COVID is very different when you look at it in the aggregate. When you have that information that you can see the entire picture. Most people don't understand that, and they will if they read the book. By the way, everybody loves the book for the cover, of course, right? Because it's a great Christmas gift. But the book has nothing to do, as you know, with Dr. Fauci. He's mentioned 3 times in the book. It's a metaphorical cover. What they were telling you in the media and from the government wasn't necessarily the entire truth. And that's kind of the point of Fauci's fiction. But those 3 caveats are so important. And when you understand how testing works, and you understand timelines of viruses, you understand co-infection, you understand this in totality with all of your patients, it really paints a different picture of COVID. So we understood this like in April, when the first 441 visits we did were home visits when everyone was locked down. And you got to remember, perspective is important. We're out there with PPE and masks, taking it very seriously, just like everybody else. I'm coming home as I'm calling. I called every single positive. So when I'm calling them, the first grouping is basically giving me more information for the next grouping, because you're learning. So you're talking to a 75-year-old person, husband and wife, in the first week, and you don't know if they're going to die, if they're going to develop symptoms. So you're calling them, and then you're following up. And 2 days later, how you feeling? They're going, the fever broke. And you're going, okay. And they're saying, well, what next? And you're like, take a cruise, I guess. They're cheap, right? And that was the joke I came up with. And then the next grouping of patients the week later and the week after that, you tell them what you experienced with the first grouping, and you're telling them, like, all my patients seem to be getting over this just fine. And the regimen we used was very simple. It was vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and electrolytes. The 4 patients that I had go to the hospital in the entirety of this went because they were dehydrated. They were a little older. They weren't taking care of themselves. And I've had COVID. I get it. The second time I had it, I was laid up in bed, and I didn't want to eat or drink either, but have to, hydrate yourself so you don't get sicker. I kind of, lady, I explained this early on in this. I said, if you're in the pool of population that can die in the next 5 years, a cold can bring you down, a flu can bring you down, COVID can bring you down. You need to take care of yourself, right? It's a respiratory pathogen. It can wear you out. But people are still 4 years later, don't understand how testing works. And by the way, this is a shocker, right? You get the government, the Biden administration sending out 8 rapid tests to every single household. This is important. We just talked about PCR testing and how accurate that was and how it's going to look for multiple things. A rapid test, in contrast to those 9 copies of a virus, you need 10 to the 6 to 10 to the 9th power of virus to turn a rapid card positive. What does that mean? Instead of 9 copies, you need 9 million to 9 billion. So that really tells me nothing, because if you turn positive on a rapid, you definitely have enough virus that you're positive for something. That's the caveat, because a positive on a rapid could be any coronavirus, including the common cold. There are 7 we test for. So scientifically, it tells me nothing except you have something. A negative tells me nothing. And when I went down to Key West, we had an office down there for a while. It was funny because we were the only ones doing PCR testing. So we'd get a positive on a PCR, which means you absolutely 100% have COVID. They would run out to the clinic down the street to do a rapid test just so they could get a negative so they could travel. And you're like, you're defeating the purpose here. Like, people would take advantage of that, but not understand what it really meant.
So explain to me, because you talked to me too, but or you said in your book that you were the first to start this and the first to start taking data and results and stuff like that. But then when you went to go share it, that was almost, a struggle in itself. You want to dive a little bit into that for us?
It's still a struggle. I mean, I first put up a post early saying, hey, this is blown out of proportion. Like, we should adopt the Swedish model. I got ridiculed right away. And I was like, all right, these people are trying to like cancel you because they think you're going to kill everybody. Meanwhile, I don't go to their job and tell them how to flip the burgers. Like, it's like, you do your thing, I do my thing. And you'd have this all the time. And we never required masks in our office. I'd have people walk in my office and yell at my staff, why aren't you wearing masks? What do you do for a living? You're an accountant? I don't come to your job and tell you to file my taxes. Like, I don't think they've ever had a class in virology. There's a lot to it, but it's still to this day. Amazon won't let me sponsor the book. That's what drives it up in the rankings there, due to what they said was current events. Every time I do an interview, I did one out of the UK not too long ago, and the producer called me up right away. They put it up on YouTube and it got taken down immediately. YouTube has been very weird. There are certain platforms better than, I'm sure because you put it up on multiple platforms. It is very strange how it's like the algorithm is now built. If you say the word vaccine or COVID, that they just immediately suppress whatever you have. When I push the book out on Facebook, if I do an ad for it on Facebook or any meta platform, which would be Instagram as well, they immediately will say, no, you have to appeal it. And you're talking to some fact checker who's some kid who doesn't understand facts, but they want to assume because it says COVID, or they think this is, bashing Fauci, which again, it mentions him 3 times and it doesn't say anything bad about him. The data speaks for itself. It's kind of interesting.
As you're saying this, and just to kind of, I don't mean to laugh, but this is so real, people, that you have to understand that we go on multiple channels here live. And since I've already had him, DLive has kicked us off and YouTube's already kicked us off.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. So it's amazing, just because, like you said, probably the word Fauci or the word COVID, it's not even understanding the fact that we're just talking about science here. And one of the things I love about science is that, they always say things are a hypothesis. There's very rarely it get beyond that, because that's the beauty of science. It's to test and retest and analyze and study, and and it's like none of that existed. It was the one medium, the one way, and how dare anybody come and even think or even challenge it in any way. But that's what science is supposed to be about, is to study a situation and come up with the best hypothesis. And that just did not happen, still not happening. And like you said, it's 4 years in.
Scary. I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about how testing works, how viruses transmit, how to keep people safe, giving them some information of what they know, and you get kicked off a platform for what? It's scary if you really think about it in the totality. I always said when we were doing this, because you got to remember, we didn't develop this in like a day. This took months and months to figure it out. But the same information that's in this book, I have been telling patients probably 6 months in, we were given this dissertation to patients as they were coming in because they didn't understand testing. They didn't understand, you're arguing with patients who think they're negative when they're positive. And again, I'll give you a story. You probably read about this in the book about a police officer. He came to me, he was very upset. We had to test him weekly and he got a positive, and he's calling me up and he's trying to tell me he's got no symptoms. And I said, okay, you're in the norm. And he's going, yeah, but I don't have any symptoms. And he wasn't listening to me. I was trying to explain to him, you're in the norm. That is the norm to not have a symptom. This is what we're seeing in the aggregate. So he's going, can I come in tomorrow for another test, a confirmatory test? Sure. So he came in the office and the lab doesn't care. I'm shipping these things off to Virginia, Texas. They don't know who you are. They just assign it an accession number. And of course, the next day his sample comes up positive. I get, 99 negatives, 1 positive. It's him, right? Repeatable data. So then I call him up and I said, dude, you're still positive. You're positive. I'm trying to explain to him that you're in the norm. That is the norm not to have a symptom. And then I see his name pop up a week later because he snuck into the same police department's clinic that we test. First of all, he's supposed to be isolated. He didn't want to care about that, but he snuck in again. And I'm calling him. I'm saying, dude, stop testing. You're positive. Just wait the 10 days and you're done. I mean, you can test positive for up to 90 days on a PCR. It means nothing. It just means you are shedding dead material. That's the end of it's picking up the signal. But these people don't understand that. And you were having this conversation every single day, hundreds of times sometimes, because we would do sometimes 400 tests in a day. So it was very frustrating for me. We always wanted to give our patients the information the moment we had it. So if those results came in at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, I was calling those patients at 10, 11, 12 o'clock. And I would get a lot of flack for being on the phone for sometimes a half hour in the beginning, talking people off a ledge because they're thinking, I'm going to die. What do I do? Do I go to the hospital? That's, and we're trying to, no, stay home, relax. You're getting into things like proning later and, home remedies. But again, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and electrolytes, that was the treatment for all 4,000 positives. It was kind of incredible. And still to this day, I still have to have this conversation, which is why I wrote the book. Now I could just say it's in the book, read the book, because it gets old, whether it's on masking or vaccine, whatever. But I mean, there's a lot to it, but we learned a lot from our patient population. This wasn't some hypothesis we just made up.
I get that, but I see a little bit of the police officer side too, because again, like you said, I mean, there are so many businesses and it shouldn't have been needed, but there are so many businesses until you could prove that you didn't have it, you couldn't even go back. So if the officer's trying to support his family and they won't let him come back without a negative, you're stuck in that situation too. I was stuck in a situation where this is one thing I totally disagree with, is that you mandated the businesses either make you do this or fire you. And I was like, oh, no. I'm not a doctor. This is what I really hated. I am not your doctor. And there is no way I'm qualified to tell you what to do with your body.
Right.
That's been something completely done with the healthcare. Instead of, you're going to be fired, or you can't come back to work, or all this, unless you prove to me or you take this. And that's one of the things I think we severely failed on as well.
Oh, I totally agree. And we're on the same side here. And I have this argument with patients sometimes, because sometimes I'll get a patient who's on our side, mentally, and they think the same way. And they'll say to me, I never tested for COVID, and they're proud of it. And I try to explain to them, I said, doing the mass testing is what gave me the data to prove our side by testing everybody at the same time. And by the way, and this is kind of interesting, but you can see how the government made COVID disappear. And no one's really talking about this. And I do talk about it on interviews, but it's kind of getting into the weeds. Do you want me to go there really quick?
Yeah.
Okay. You're cutting in and out a little bit. So I'm going to make sure you can hear me. So you got to remember, in the beginning of COVID, the way you run a respiratory pathogen panel is you have to have what's called a medical necessity. And you know this, I'm sure, from your husband. We can't write an order unless you have a reason for us to write a test. So you have to have either a cough, fever, or shortness of breath. So if you remember, in the beginning of COVID, no symptoms, no test, and all these lines, you had to have something. So in order for me to test you, I had to have a symptom. And remember, from my patient population, 90% of the people did not have a symptom. When the CARES Act came out, it allowed anybody in the country to get a test at any time. You could have had whatever. You didn't even have to make up a story. You were exposed to somebody who was exposed. Your roommate's brother coughed into the phone that you were listening. It didn't matter. You can get a test at any time. So when you had all these drive-through centers and everybody in the country tested, you found out a lot. You found out that everybody had it. No one was really dying from it. Most people, again, in my data, didn't have a symptom from it. So all of a sudden, you had the numbers go from here to holy crap, right? And then two things happened. One, the rapid test came out, and the administration gave those to every single person in the country. Well, you remember, those numbers do not get reported. Okay. You're not calling from your house saying, hey, I just took a rapid. I need to isolate. Who do I call the county? You're not telling the county that. So the numbers go from here to here to here. And then the last thing that happened was the CARES Act expired. You can no longer walk into my office and say, I need a test at any time. You have to have a symptom. And again, 90% of my patients didn't have a symptom. So the numbers went from here to here to here to here, just like that. That is how you make COVID disappear numbers wise. You make it, when it was readily available, the numbers were everywhere. But now that you have to go through all this minutia to get a test, you just don't see it anymore. And it is still out there, of course.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of miscommunication. I love that you put that in the book too, because you did state COVID is very real. It really is. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, it's just the flu. And no, it's not. It is very real. And my husband, who works in the hospitals now, still sees it. Still has that problem. And then brings us back to masks, which he laughs at too, because in a hospital, he's got to get them like specially fitted for him. They have to be tested. And he just laughs and he's like, that's never gonna, I don't even know, like, you could talk about the viruses too, but he's like, I don't think people understand viruses just go through this stuff. They're just in our air, they're in our particles, and if you don't have, appropriation masks, these cloth masks or these whatever masks, they are just not even going to do anything with the virus because it's going to float right through that.
Did your husband read my chapter on masks?
He's working right now, but I'm sure he's going to love reading this when he gets home, but he's been working 3 days in a row. So we'll let him, be off the hook right now. He's
got it. And that is a very important chat. I still see people on airplanes wearing masks all the time. It drives me insane. We do, and folks at home, we do not wear masks in the hospital for viruses. Okay. You wear masks for two reasons in the hospital. You wear masks so you don't get oversplatter on your face, and you're not drooling into the operative field if you're in surgery. If you are in the hospital and you work there, as Lady just said, you need to get a properly fitted N95 mask. You are fitted by the infectious disease nurse, and if it doesn't fit, they put you in a PAPR mask, which looks like a spacesuit, to make sure you're somewhat protected. But he's right, and you have to understand, and this is the most important thing, particle size is so important. When you are wearing a surgical mask, it is not duct taped to your face, okay? It is hanging off, and you are breathing through the path of least resistance. I demonstrate this all the time in my office with my vape pen. I put a mask on, and you'll kind of see that. That's what COVID is doing, okay? Because particles at any size less than 0.25 microns become so tiny, they do not settle by gravity. They become part of air fluidity. It only takes one particle, one live particle to infect you, and you can fit 500 million on a pinhead. So if you can imagine somebody symptomatic breathing out or coughing in a room, you are walking around amongst millions and billions of particles. You are doing zero with that mask, but what you are doing is making it worse, because the guy who came in who had COVID, staph, H flu, and RSV, most of the people who had staph were wearing masks the whole time because they're breathing an environment, a warm, wet environment, ripe for bacteria growth, which is why they were getting a secondary infection. You need to breathe oxygen, people, and that mask is going to do absolutely zero for you, but I don't think they were realizing how much worse it was making it.
No, and I don't think so. I always think about the kids. Kids are a great example. They're just snotty and gooey and whatever in general. Now try to put a mask on them and hold all that into them. And you don't think they're going to catch something or catch a bacterial infection or catch the flu or catch whatever, because those germs are just staying right there in their masks. It's a great example of how, besides the vape pen, it's a great example of how that does not work. But that's a great example that you showed there too. And he just goes crazy because we still see this, people in their cars, all the windows rolled up, they're wearing their masks. They might even have a shield over that. You're like, what in the world, right?
For somebody like me who does it and understands it, you may as well just write your IQ on your mask less than 84, because that is all you're telling me at that point. It is, I can't stand these people. Oh, I'm trying to stay safe. Really? You're making it worse for yourself, and you're virtue signaling into the world how intelligent you really are. Because this information's out there. My book came out in late June. Like I said, we've been trying to get the information out, but our patients. I had scared patients who would come in and their whole lives were hermits in a mask or never going out, washing their groceries. A lot of this became psychological because you're having that discussion with people. And once they understand the fear factor and understand the information, it opened up their lives to be able to live again. And that's what made me feel good about being able to disseminate that to a lot of our own patient population.
I agree. I think the number one negative to this whole situation was the fear, just what you said, because of what they were saying, the miscommunication, the inability to let people challenge this or research this and come up with, counsel. It was just the one way, and fear. You're going to die, or people are going to die. And that's all you heard. We could blame the media like crazy, for helping that situation, but it did. It enhanced it a thousandfold, or more, by, getting these people who are just terrified to even leave their situation without being in some kind of spacesuit. you know? And the number one thing is you need fresh air, like you said, get some sunlight, take some vitamins and get some rest. And my husband loves it. Fluids, 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 fluids. He's a huge advocate of fluids. You don't feel good, your skin's dry, whatever. He's like, drink water.
Yeah.
Right.
I like your husband already.
Right. I do too. Well, he just, he's also got his master's in natural healthcare as well. So he's like, honey will do you a huge, zinc will do another thing for you, again, plenty of fluids. So I love it. I want you to also, if you want to share a few stories, I was really probably touched it. I don't know, maybe it's the young lady, and I don't remember because I don't know if I got to that part, but it's a 22-year-old that really hit me really hard with you. And I don't remember reading if she is fine now. Is that something that she got through?
I think she was 20 at the time. I think she's probably 23 now. As a matter of fact, I know you're talking about the joint issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, and we just saw her. I was in my Florida office, but my staff saw her in the office, and I said, "Oh, actually, then we started chatting a little bit." She, yeah, it's interesting. And it's funny when you're looking at just science, right? Again, and you brought it up, the hypothesis. I have a paper published in the Library of Congress that I did on the CARES Act. And, you come up with a hypothesis and you either prove it or you disprove it. And that's what you publish based on the data. You let the data lead you. It's not like you are, trying to write a paper and saying, this is the end result I want. That's not how science works. Same thing with COVID. And so what you see a lot of times is cause and correlation. And this was directly related to vaccines. So she was one of the ones, she worked for a police department. She was actually an EMT at the department, and we had to test them weekly. She was one in that same group of a township we had to work with. And she came to talk to me. She was kind of forced into getting, I think she got, it was Pfizer or Moderna. I forget which one now because I'm blanking, but it was one of the mRNAs. And she got the vaccine, and within a week, her joints started to swell up to the point where she couldn't even lift the gurney. She was afraid that she was going to get fired. She didn't want to tell her work, but her joints were so swelled up that she couldn't do her job, and she's not there anymore. So I guess I could talk about it. I don't mention her name anyway, but she knows who she is. So she went and got the second shot, and the joints got worse. Okay, you can see cause and correlation. It was the timeline, and we can get into later how we're finding stuff, a year down the road. But with her, it was immediate. It was a joint issue. So then, of course, she catches COVID. Right. The very reason they tell her not to get the vaccine. And we were trying to tell people right from the beginning, we had a hypothesis, and we said the efficacy of these things is going to come down to probably about 30%. You're going to need more than one of these things. You're going to need at least one a year. And it's not going to keep you from getting or giving COVID. We knew that early on. And the public still to this day, there's a lot of people who think, oh, I've been vaccinated, I'll never get COVID. I'm just rolling my eyes. So this poor girl gets COVID, and the pain got worse. And we know why. It's because the cytokines, they inflame areas of instability. What we didn't know about this girl was that her mother had a rare disease called Charcot-Marie-Tooth syndrome, which causes this joint issue. But her mother developed it late into her 40s. This girl all of a sudden has got it at 20, immediately after the shot. And then COVID made it 10 times worse because those cytokines were rushing to areas of instability. They were flaming it up, and the pain was like unbearable. This girl gained a ton of weight. She couldn't bend down. I had her in my office, grab my hand, see if she can bend down. She couldn't get more than a couple inches down before she just swelled up, and she said, I can't move. So you felt for her, and you're going and you're trying to figure out, is it permanent? Is this going to last forever? We tried something called NAD therapy. That worked pretty well. That repairs the mitochondria of your cells, and it took a lot of the inflammation out. But it was a very short-term response. She probably got a good 3 weeks out of it in the initial, and then it lingered off for about 3 months. So an NAD you could do at any time, but it's expensive. So, you're spending money now to try to get back to a position you were in. Recently, and this is 2.5 years later, she has lost a lot of the weight due to some other issues, but getting that weight off has been so much more beneficial for her joints. She's still got a little bit of that going on, but it has kind of, and I've noticed this too with long COVID. Working out, deep lung expansion, forcing oxygen into the capillaries that aren't normally getting, good oxygen supply. That seems to help with a lot of the long COVID issues. But if you're like myself and you stop working out in between, you atrophy, and then you kind of go back to normal, you've really got to keep at it. So there's a lot of things we're still learning. But I think what you're getting at is we can see a lot of the cause and correlation with the vaccines. And in her story in particular, you saw it right at the beginning. And with other people, it's sometimes 6 months later, a year later, and you're finding the issues on ancillary findings, incidental findings, when you're going in for a procedure and you're doing an EKG and all of a sudden you have a heart issue that you didn't know about. Those are the things that we're starting to see in abundance. And right now, what we're seeing is cancers like we've never talked about, just rare cancers coming in with a vengeance. People who were in remission, now it's all of a sudden back with a vengeance. Cancer in young people, lymphoma especially. There's a lot of that we're seeing now. And it was, I'll give you one that I talked about. This is my fourth interview today. So, but my most favorite, I get to actually talk about the book. I was just talking about Dr. Jancy Lindsay is working with me. I'm going to be writing a second book called Vaccine Fiction. Okay. So that's kind of the follow-up. And she always points out this chart, and I talk about it a lot. It is 30 years worth of data for stillborn births related to vaccines. Okay. And if you look at the chart, it's 25 or less. Okay. For 30 years. And then in 2021, it's 3,600. And in 2022, it's 1,600. The data is right there. It's right in front of us. And this is the stuff in small numbers that we were seeing in our office. And then you're seeing the larger numbers when you compare some of that stuff. The data is there, but no one in the White House, Kareem Jean-Pierre's not talking about this. They had a narrative. Now they have buyer's remorse. They're going to stick to it. It's like the car they promised their parents they really wanted. They saved all their money up. The parents said, that's a lemon. And the kid said, I'm buying it. It's the best car in the world. They get it. It is a lemon, but they'll never admit that it was a lemon. Well, the vaccine was a lemon. It didn't work. It doesn't work. It's not, it is such a fallacy, by the way, lady, for them to, and your husband probably knows this, for anybody in the government or medicine to say if you get the vaccine, you will get less symptomatic. That is such BS. That is almost blatant malpractice. You have people just as sick. The numbers did not change. By the way, we have data pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. And guess what? The numbers are exactly the same. It is 85 to 90% asymptomatic, 10 to 15% classical symptoms. The death rate, the hospital, it is exactly the same. And there is a reason why a lot of people in the beginning went to the hospital. And there's a reason why a lot of people died in the beginning. There's two big reasons. Well, three, really. If you count the third would be fear. A lot of people went to the hospital out of pure fear. But the two reasons people died, novelty. Okay. Novelty is huge. If you and I and your husband and all of our friends took a trip to some indigenous island and hugged all the indigenous people, they'd probably get sick and some would die off due to they're not immune to some of the stuff that we're immune to. That's number one. Number two is we had no idea how to treat this thing. We were using flu protocol, which flares it up. We learned a lot. Proning is so easy. I talk about that in my book in the treatment section. We use proning. That's just taking the patient and turning them over. Your lungs are in your back. When you're laying on your back, that fluid's going to pool. I had more conversations with patients who would get those pulse oxes and call me and say, I'm at 88. What do I do? And I'd say, turn on your stomach, take a nap, and call me in a half hour. And they're thinking I'm nuts. They'd call me an hour later and go, I'm at 95. How'd you do that? And I'm like, you're just draining the fluids out so you can get oxygen to areas that haven't been oxygenated. So there's a lot of little things we learned right in the beginning, but we were venting people way too early. That was a big reason we were killing people. People were bucking the vent because, again, it was flu protocol, but who knew that it was going to be a cytokine storm that would, it was an over-inflammatory reaction. And we
Right.
learned pretty early on that we needed to use immunosuppressive techniques, but people weren't catching up. And then once everybody did in the medical community, we kind of quelled that initial, holy moly. And now you don't see many people dying from COVID. They die with COVID, just like they die with the flu and with the cold and with anything else. But
Right.
if you're in that pool of population going to die in the next 5 years, you got to take care of yourself. And
that is the most important thing too, is, and we did, and we stuck in isolation or quarantine or whatever you want to call it, but people forgot that, you could be outside, you could, start eating healthier, you could start doing, and they didn't, and maybe throughout their whole life though too, but it's so important to get as healthy and be as healthy as possible, even with the flu. I mean, this is the one of the greatest things I say too, is how many people get the flu vaccine and then still get the flu?
sure, it's a
So
30%
many people. That's right. So you think that this vaccine was gonna do something miraculous? No, it was, it was it going to work? Was it not going to work? But it's no different than something like the flu. It may not. Most likely, you're still going to catch that, and there's a great possibility that you could. Maybe you don't, but there's a good chance you're still going to be able to catch that.
Well, here's the data. We see from the vaccine measured data, 120-day average antibody response. That's what we see, and that's it's kind of like getting a flu shot, but think about the context in which it was given. You wouldn't run out and get 4 flu shots in 1 year, right? But people are running out and get 4 COVID shots in 1 year. We give the flu shot before the seasonality of the flu in our area. We weren't doing that with COVID shots. We were giving it at any time. And what we saw again in measured data was 120 days antibody response. By the way, you also get 120-day average antibody response from natural immunity, but there's a big difference between natural immunity and the vaccine antibodies, because the antibodies are antibodies. They're measured. We measure 3 different ones: IgA, IgM, and IgG, and those will tail off after a bit. But with COVID, if you understand how COVID is built, it's a virus is, first of all, a virus is not a living thing. A virus is it's either active or inactive, kind of like an amino acid. When you understand that a virus is kind of like a parasite, it's not technically classified as a parasite. They're like parasites. They need a host to survive. All right. So they're not living things. They're not having little viruses on their own. Once they get into you, they're replicating, making versions of themselves. So what they do is they make copies of copies of copies of copies. And if you were to do that on a copier, eventually it would burn out. It wouldn't look like the original copy. But they developed this weird shape on the end. That's the spike protein mutating. When you get COVID naturally, though, there's 27 roughly proteins inside the capsule, the envelope of that virus. So when you get it naturally, you're getting what's called B and T lymphocytes. Your B cells are your memory cells, your T cells are your helper cells. So when you get COVID naturally, you're building memory cells to the entirety of the virus. But when it makes those copies and mutates and gets that weird shape, the next time you get it, your body got fooled by the spike protein. But once it enters your system, you have memory to the majority of the proteins inside COVID or SARS-CoV-2. And this is what people need to understand. So it's going to get less and less the more you get it. However, different spike proteins, as we've learned, have caused different symptomology. And that is kind of very interesting. People don't realize that. That's why, like, the Omicron came out, it was kind of like the common cold, and the Delta was coming out, and it was more like, a lung thing or a pain thing. Everyone's a little bit different. So you're responding really to the spike protein.
Right. And it mutates and it changes. And, I think sometimes too, when you have like a herd immunity, you have your body, from what my husband has told me, and he's not here to clarify what I'm saying, so I might slaughter this, but when you get it in a natural way, your body goes into an ability to like, okay, now that I know this, I recognize this, and builds up like antibodies to be able to fight it off better the next time it comes around, So, he always says that the best way to get this and move on is through herd immunity, right? Through getting it, and letting your body fight it off naturally, if it can. Some people,
and that's what we just talked about. It is the B and T lymphocyte. It's not technically antibodies, so it's the B and T lymphocyte response. That's the memory response that you have the next time it comes around. Yes.
See, this is why I don't tell people to do something. I'm not medically qualified.
Well, I'm a research doctor. I got to be careful when giving. I have, my staff is all medical, but I'm research. And then it was funny because you'll do like interviews, and sometimes people go, well, but you're not a medical doctor. And I'll go, well, the medical doctors all quit during COVID, and it was the research doctors that kind of put the data in perspective. And that's how we treat in our facilities. My staff, who is all medical, was privy to all this. And, we learned this very quick, and they were able to change their treatment protocols, and they were able to talk to their patients intelligently about this rather than say, I don't know. That's been a big problem. I write about we touched on it earlier. I write about a cardiologist in the book who was recommending vaccines. And he said to me at dinner, he goes, I used to recommend the vaccine all the time, but now I don't when I see all the problems with it. I said, why were you recommending them in the first place? You had no knowledge of, you didn't do this for a living. Like, we're primary care. If somebody comes to our office and asks me about cardiology, we send them to you. We don't pretend to know about cardiology. Meanwhile, you had oncologists, pediatricians, everybody who didn't do this, who closed their doors, recommending vaccines based on the CDC guidelines, because that's what they had to go off of. But their best answer, lady, should have been, I don't know. That would have saved the medical community, would have saved a lot of patients' lives. But they didn't have the wherewithal to just say those little words, I don't know. How hard is that to just admit you don't know something? We don't know everything in our office. But if you want to talk COVID, I mean, I did this for years. I wrote a paper on it in the Library of Congress, like I said, on the CARES Act. This is what we did. So we're happy to talk about this all day, but there are too many practitioners out there who play, God. And that comes into play, the God complex. There's a lot of great practitioners out there too. I'm not bashing the medical community, but the ones who guessed on this thing, they guessed wrong, and so wrong that they're hurting people like that patient we just talked about, and that wasn't even her fault. That was more the township and the police department and people who are mandating these things based again on CDC guidelines and doctors who had no idea what they were talking about.
Right. And, they're practicing medicine for a reason. It's supposed to be something where you're ongoing learning, you're in a science-based field. And like we talked about before, the beauty of science is to be able to challenge it, study that, and break that hypothesis and say, okay, that didn't work. And then what does work? I mean, that's, like I said, the beauty of science, which we just did not see. It was the one size fits all. And unfortunately, it really hurt the medical community. And with myself, I mean, I turned to my husband most of the time, and it took me like 3 or so years before I would trust a new doctor. I didn't even go back to the one I had, but I'm not sure if I had COVID when they sent me home from Columbia or not. I was in New York City. But I'll tell you what, something totally went wrong with me to the point where I could not walk. I was basically paralyzed. And their answer was, just stay, don't do anything, don't move, take all these medications, don't exercise, don't anything, as you're gaining weight and you're inflamed everywhere, and just wait to die. And my husband's like, no. But he did the same thing. Let's talk about some natural things. Let's start getting you some vitamins. Let's start getting you outside. Let's get you some fluids. Let's give you some magnesium. Let's get you on some zinc, Let's start eating all natural foods, anything chemical. And lo and behold, in a matter of a few weeks, I started to feel things. The inflammation was going down, something occasionally that I still fight, but I would not. I mean, that in itself, just, hey, take the vaccine or take these pills and whatever, and, stay isolated. That was their answer.
Yeah.
And you lost a lot of respect and belief and stuff in the medical community. And I don't know how many years it's going to be before that damage, can be fixed.
Yeah. And to bring what you just said full circle into what we talked about in the beginning of this interview was the respiratory pathogen panel. You think we would learn, right? We talk about this all day till we're blue in the face about how you diagnose, how you treat once it's diagnosed properly. There are still doctors and all day long won't do a respiratory pathogen panel, don't have a clue they exist, don't want to take the time to really. And it's funny because I for years before COVID was I would educate doctors on this all day long. It's not just that. We do another test called a pharmacogenetic test. Do you know what that is?
No, please tell me.
A PGX, by the way, it's been out for 25 years. This is it's done with a cheek swab. It's non-invasive. It can swab your cheek, takes 30 seconds, goes off to the lab. 2 weeks later, get a 35-page report. It tells me how your liver metabolizes meds. So basically, I can tell you what meds you can and can't take for the rest of your life and at what dosage based on how your liver metabolizes it. So if you're a poor metabolizer in a certain pathway, the medication won't even work, but you'll get all these side effects. When you hear doctors trying to find the right cocktail of meds, you don't need to do that. This test has been out for 25 years, and we employed in our office all the time. You get a senior on 7 meds. A lot of times they're on med 7 to offset the side effects of medication 2. You do a PGX test. You can tell them you're not supposed to be on this, you're supposed to be on a lower dosage of that. This one's got a drug interaction with that. Next thing you know, you're on 4 meds. You feel a lot better, but doctors don't, again, want to take the time to do it. God complex gets in the way all the time. You know how many times I've heard from a doctor, oh, I've been writing meds for 30 years and I don't need a report to tell me what to write. Really? Because I don't, what you might take and what I might take are 2 completely different things at work. There are a lot of these things out there. that are available to practitioners, but they don't get taught in medical school.
Right.
I've watched this in my office. I have the student NP right now is getting trained by the other NP, and the student NP is getting trained by somebody who got trained 30 years ago. So, they don't update. My office is a little different, but you see this in practice. They just don't. It's like this stuff is out there. It's available. When it comes to respiratory pathogens, we learned so much from that mass testing, from that cop not wanting to test. And I don't blame him for not wanting to test, but by de facto having that mass data, we learned so much that we really could start treating again in the 21st century and not be, we're really treating in like the 19th century. We're like treating in the 1800s right now. We're just still guessing, and we don't need to. It's right there in front of you. And I'm happy if there's a doctor watching your show or an office watching your show, an NP, a PA, an office manager, and they want to learn about, I'll be happy to set them up with some of the labs that we work with. They're fine labs around the country. They do great work. There's no cost to this stuff. It's just taking the time to do it so that you can understand it better.
Nice. Nice. All right, doctors, nurses out there. And I'm sure my husband will enjoy watching this later too, because he is on that route as well. His big thing is what does the doctor mean by that? And just like you said, you're taking all these medications with the side effects and the this, and, and you're like, is this all necessary? And, the doctors don't spend the time to even discuss this or even test, because, hey, I've been writing that script to all these patients all these years. You must be just the same, right? And we're all so different. And they just don't take the time, or do they care? I don't know. And not to disrespect everybody out there. It just seems like a lot of them we got to see firsthand, and this was brought to the limelight during this pandemic. So
my fiance is doing she's doing her clinicals right now for her NP, and she just started peds like this week. And I called her as soon as she got done. She called me, and I said, how'd it go? And she said, oh, it went well. We saw a lot of patients. The doctor's great, this and that, blah, blah, blah. I said, does he do RPP? She goes, you'll be happy to know he does. She goes, he did 2 today. And I said, I would, because I judge how, if I'm going to send somebody to, as a referral, I would never, there's a lot of doctors I'd never send to any of these guys. Well, when she was telling me how he was practicing, he has the same type of philosophy where he tries to be accurate and he wants to help his patients, spends the time and has access to testing to do it appropriately. And when she was telling me how he practiced, I said, thank God. And he's an older guy. He's actually on his way out, but he's he's ready to retire, but he's got his office running like clockwork and he does the right thing. So there are great practitioners out there. And by the way, there's a lot of great practitioners out there who are still dealing with the effects of COVID because they were trying to get the word out like me. And they're now dealing with, hospital issues, court cases, what you have. There's one in particular by me in New Jersey who's having a tough time right now because he spoke the truth and he was right 100% of the time, but he was going against hospital protocol. He wasn't forcing masks in his office. He got in trouble for that. We never forced a mask in our office either, but we're not hospital affiliated, so I don't really care. And the state, have the governor come in and tell me. I mean, it wasn't appropriate. We weren't going to tell our patients to do something stupid for the sake of going along with it and jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge. It made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, like I said, the doctor I have now, he did once work with my husband. And when he was, fighting this and seeing the repercussions come against him for wanting to fight this and wanting to understand this and wanting to study this most, and he was not comfortable with just, hey, everybody gets the shot. Everybody, and when he's got a nursing home full of patients and he doesn't even know the ingredients to even counteract or help them along the way, he's like, that's it. He's like, that's it. And you're going to come after me for wanting to even just study the situation. He's like, no. And he left and he opened his own practice. So lucky for me, I got that. That's the doctor I want.
Yeah,
I want the doctor that's going to challenge the narrative. I want the doctor that thinks I'm unique and wants to study my health, and I might have the same pills as somebody else, but that's not his thing. He wanted to have an individualized care. And I'm like, that's the doctor I want.
Well, you give him my best. I know the crap that he went through to get to where he is, because we all dealt with it, and it's scary. And it's scary that so many people went along with the narrative.
Right. It is. And I think that's probably the most scariest. It's just how many people just went along with the narrative, right? That really, really bothers me, instead of challenging, especially when you're in the science field. Why would you not challenge that narrative? Because from what I understand, again, that's what science is supposed to be about. is, is never a proven thesis, a theory. You're always looking to break that theory or find out, is that the right one? But they never even call it a theory because it never gets 100% accuracy, but that is. So I'm going to show this here too, just so everyone can see this amazing book. I do have it. Oh, did it go away? Okay, there we go. Look at this picture, everyone. So I'm going to show you everyone the book. I know that you're holding it up, but this is also, but if you guys want to know, I've put every link how to get a hold of Dr. Schwartz in my permanent chats below. So you can find those links, those websites, find out his book. I love the drawing on this, by the way. I don't want to get kicked off with 3 more channels, but it's a great, it's a great thing.
It's
and it's really not about Fauci. Right. And people, whether you love him or hate him, right? He was the forefront of this move of fear. And unfortunately, he did no justice.
Yeah, when you think COVID, you see his face. It's and he gets the brunt of the cover. That's him. That's Dr. Birx. That's Walensky. That's everybody. It's CDC. I mean, he gets the front of it because you think back. And I came up with that lady when I was sitting at home and I was talking to Kelly. I said, "What about Fauci? Is like a Pinocchio with the nose coming through the mask." And she goes, "William," I said, "Well, all I think about in COVID is like seeing him in those briefings." And I just see him up there with like this nose just coming out of the mask, and that's where it came from. And everybody loves the cover.
Truth and producing more fear. Yes, I do. And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you were getting.
I was just going to say
a little bit of an audio.
Right. It's really, I'm sorry, but he's the one that helped push this fear. He's the one that was out there sitting there spouting off the same protocol. So if you're going to stand and spout it, you're going to have to own it. And you can be the face of it, and he definitely was the face of this.
Yeah, we didn't have to go through the exercise we went through, and we knew that very early on. I had a friend of mine who owns a DJ, like an entertainment company, and I wrote about him in the book too. He called me in March, and he said early on, and he said, "How long do you think this is going to last?" And I was putting numbers there by the end of March, and I said, I think September, everybody will kind of calm down. We'll get back to normal. Then it was like September of 20 I was talking about, because I said it can't take them that long to catch up to me. That's what I said. And then this thing went on for, years. And this guy's business was shut down. And I mean, the damage it did to the world, but our nation as a whole is just, it didn't need to happen.
Now, you said in your quote, with the fear of, a new emerging pandemic coming, or a new emerging, things out of China, it's always coming out of there. But I mean, do you think that we would handle that any differently? Or you think that they would go with the same kind of whole fear and one way fits all? Or how do you think that they would handle? Do you think they learned anything from it? Or do you think that they were happy the way things played out?
So I say this over and over, medicine is not one size fits all. And when you get to the end of the book, the very last chapter, I actually say that I don't think we've learned anything. I think if something like this happened again, we'd handle it the exact same way. It's still amazing to me, this, and I take this personally because I wrote this for my patients and for those people that were fearful and asking every day. And I would talk them off the ledge the same way it gives the information in this book. It puts it in anecdotal stories, easy to understand, a lot of science in there, but it puts it in a perspective that you can easily understand. I unfortunately have to have the same conversation on multiple interviews or with people one-on-one because the masses haven't gotten this information. All what it took was a good, hour long substitute one of his White House briefings with somebody who knew this stuff and would just explain timelines, respiratory pathogen panels, how testing works, all that fun stuff to take the fear away. And we could have saved a lot of suicides and kids' educations and everything we put this country through. Unfortunately, I think we would handle it the same way. And now you see what's coming out of China. By the way, we've identified what's out of China. It's a mycoplasma. It's resistant to azithromycin, a big deal. There's other things we can use. There's doxy. There's a bunch of stuff we can use for what's going on out there. And it's not novel. But in China, they're talking about lockdowns and masking again. I mean, and now we're talking about it here because of there. But this isn't something new. We're going into election season, so you never know what to expect from the media. But this book, I didn't write this selfishly. I wrote and I dedicated it to my dad. And thank you for putting it up. Because like I said, he did pass. And what we saw in his autopsy was an enlarged heart through a clot. His kidneys looked like they were going to fail. And what we see on the autopsies from vaccinated patients a lot of times are enlarged hearts. We see inflammation in areas it's not supposed to be, like the kidneys. So when his autopsy came back, I was very suspect, and I did implore him multiple times. I said, Dad, you do not want this shot. You do not need this shot. Just like I tell my patients, you don't need this. Everybody's fine. But my dad and my stepmom were watching MSNBC. So if you watch that channel, you know what they were pushing.
Right.
Fear. And
Yes.
unfortunately, my dad's not here today.
Right. And that, and that's, like you said, how many people have we lost when it was not necessary, and same thing. And it was almost like, verbatim, like the media was literally almost just on what's the word I'm looking for? Like a script, right? It was just like just one thing. I mean, even the words they would use was just like absolutely script. And you just hear it from one to the other, to one to the other, and not a single one even challenging it. Not a single one. I mean, that was probably so disheartening to not even say, well, if they would even allow it to have anybody even challenge the situation. Luckily, I don't know if you know the second opinion doctors and things like that, like Dr. Malone, that came out and said, no, we are going to challenge this. We are going to start working on this. And, thank heavens for doctors like that who said, no, we're going to face whatever you're going to bring to us, but we believe something different.
Yeah.
Dr.
Malone, pretty much invented the mRNA vaccine. And then you had America's frontline doctors. Dr. Simone Gold lost her license for a while. They really disrupted a lot of people's lives for not going along with, the byline of this thing, and then trying to paint those people as conspiracy theorists or, pseudoscience. It's kind of funny. It's always the people that are yelling, we follow the science, that are following the pseudoscience. They had 3 studies on masks. I don't know if you saw that were published on the CDC website that had like no participants. One was like on a boat with, I think it was American servicemen, like 182 people. And it was like self-reported. Did you wear a mask? Did you catch COVID? Like that's how they derive their science, to say masks work. We knew right from the beginning, the mask was the second dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. The mass vaccination of every man, woman, and child with an untested vaccine for something that they didn't need was the dumbest thing I have ever seen in my career. Medicine is not one size fits all. In medicine, we don't give the same dosage to a 50-pound kid that we give to a 250-pound man. If you have clotting issues, we weren't doing D-dimer tests to see if these people were having microclots. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And the majority of the country went along with this thing and made people feel that didn't go along with it or questioned it. They made them out to be pariahs. It is time we stand up and say no. And I said that from the beginning. Tucker Carlson said something on one of his shows years ago, and I started adopting it. He said, it's time, when people would look at you and say, why aren't you wearing a mask? He'd say, you need to turn that around and look at a person and say, why are you wearing a mask? It's making me uncomfortable. And I started doing that. I mean, I never wore a mask unless I was on an airplane and I had to fly somewhere. They wouldn't let me fly unless I had the mask on. But as soon as I got in the airport, I'd take that thing off and people are staring at me like, who's this guy without a mask on? But I know better. And I know you guys are just dumb. We could all get together and say, this is stupid. We have the science, or we could just go along with it. And it just amazes me. It reminded me of 1930s Germany and the Holocaust. And, it's just so surreal to me that in the media that you mentioned, I mean, it's their job to question things, to get to the bottom of things. And they just went along with the narrative. It just, the whole thing to me is sick.
Absolutely. I love the reference of, I don't know if everybody has seen this, but it's like the game board, and everybody, there's a lot of people underneath the game board holding the game board up, as they're playing the game. And I'm like, if everyone just realized you could just stand, the game would fall over, and everybody, that's the thing, you got to stand. And it's kind of hard when you're facing a government that's supporting a narrative, and they're going to take your business, or they're going to take, your well, they did take our families in one way or another, but you see this, and it's very, very scary when it should be a situation where everybody's working together to figure out what is the healthiest way through this disaster. And that did not happen. And we need to make sure that does not happen again. What would you advise people as we're seeing more of this, coming out? And there may be, you never know that, guys, there may be a real pandemic that comes that, what do you do? I personally say the healthier you get your body into now, the better prepared you're going to be for later. And that's always a word of the wise. But what would you recommend that people do? You have a little bit more knowledge of this.
Well, I mean, first, do I think COVID was a pandemic? Yeah. I mean, it was a novel thing. And there's a story about where that came. And obviously it wasn't zoonotic. We can kind of trace it back to the lab leak theory. And the evidence is there. Um, yeah, it was a pandemic, but I don't think whatever this was, whether it was natural or engineered, it didn't kill people like people thought it was going to do. We discovered this happens all the time though. NL63, Netherlands 63 is a coronavirus that was discovered in 2014. It's something we test for. It's probably something you've never heard of, and it gives cold-like symptoms to mainly kids. But if it were another thing like NL63 or SARS-CoV-2 to come out, a pandemic occurs when you scare the entire populace into thinking you're all going to die. I guess my point was in the book, we had so much early data to show that most people weren't dying from this. It was very treatable and recoverable. And we knew that early enough to say, put the brakes on, which again could have happened with NL63, but you would have never known that because maybe there wasn't during an election season or something like that. Who knows? I think, look, people really need to educate themselves, and we need to have a serious conversation about what we just went through over the last 3 to 4 years. We haven't had that conversation. We're getting distracted with a lot of things. Funny, I was doing so many interviews when the book came out, and then all of a sudden the Israel thing happened. And, there's a lot of media attention on that. My interviews just stopped completely. Now all of a sudden I'm getting a lot of requests for interviews because of this new thing in China, and people want to talk about that. And there's not much to talk about because, it's not really anything to worry about. What we need to be talking about is COVID and what we did. And nobody wants to talk about it because we have COVID fatigue. People want to get back to their lives and they say, oh, I don't want to talk about it. And you know how many people I talk about and they see the book and they go, I don't want to talk about that anymore. I go, really? This is what you need to be. Your kids were out of school for how long? How many people do you know that are having adverse reactions from vaccines, or someone who committed suicide? Or here's one that'll break your heart, lady. And I write about this in the book, but while we were doing the testing for nursing homes and assisted livings, I watched more 80 and 90-year-old birthdays happen through glass from families that weren't allowed to come in. And I was inside testing, and I would see that person and their families 30 feet away on the other side, outside in the freezing cold, doing a happy birthday to grandma. And then grandma would later die of depression. And that's got to live with you. I've seen more deaths from COVID, not from the virus itself, but from from what we did from COVID. One nursing home in particular I write about in the book, they had like 15 deaths before we got there. And again, novel, didn't know how to treat it. A lot of issues with that. When we got there, population was under control. We found 15 or 16 positives out of 56 the first day we tested. And of course they're thinking, oh my God, all these people are going to die. They all survived. And not only did they survived 2-3 years of isolation and quarantine and all the other things they had to do while testing every week. And then they all got vaccinated when the vaccines came out in 2021, and 6 of them through clots, like within 2 weeks of getting the vaccine. 3 died. The other 3 survived, but 6 of them clotted out within 2 weeks of getting the vaccine. So here they are surviving COVID, thinking they're going can't wait for this vaccine to come out. And lo and behold, it's one of the worst things. And by the way, what's coming out in book 2, there's a big part of that, and I'm talking to Deborah Conrad about this, is the way the way things get reported to VAERS is very important. And people need to understand that, because we live in a world of data, and we live in a world where we will sit and cherry pick data. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about people on the news will go, well, there's not a lot of people dying from, the shot. There's not a lot of there's a lot of adverse reactions from the shot. It's the way it gets reported. When you have a positive COVID case, the labs that I work with by law have to report that to the state and the county. So in the beginning, when you saw those PCR numbers, they were fairly accurate. And we talked about how those numbers are inaccurate now with home tests. And of course, now CARES Act's expired. Theirs is very different. Nobody that I work with has ever reported anything to VAERS. No one is trained on how to report to VAERS. And apparently it's about an hour-long process. You have to know the lot number. So you're a doctor who's getting an adverse reaction that you think is from the shot. And then you have to go and track where they got it down at the Walgreens or the CVS, and multiple shots, track the lot numbers down, report this thing. And if you screw up somewhere along the way, you have to start over. Most people don't report anything to VAERS. So what you see in VAERS is probably less than 5% of what's out there. So if you got to 1 million deaths in VAERS, multiply that by 20, because that's what's out there in the world that's being unreported.
Isn't that just convenient? Let's make it really hard to actually report it accurately so that we can get some, true data. Isn't that just convenient? And there's no doctor that's going to sit there for no hour and have to redo and restart and whatever, no, absolutely. Horrific. I can't wait. And you're all absolutely welcome back when you have your second book too, because we need to still, and everybody, I'm putting this back up here again. You can I would love it for you because we need to sit here and still have information on this. How many people out there still are believing this? How many people are still living in fear? These are why these books and this information is still so important, even though we're in 4 years onto this, because we still see people driving around with masks on that still live in isolation and or fear. And unfortunately, we still have jobs out there, and I know I've seen it, that are still mandating this. So school system's one of them. Very many teachers are still mandated this. How many healthcare professionals are still mandated to have these vaccines? And we still don't know and still don't have the data to support this information. But yet they still promote it. They still mandate it. I mean, it's just, we're still doing it wrong.
My friend Adam came in a couple of weeks ago. Same guy I read about in the book, owns a DJ company. He won't mind me talking about this, but our office is a little further from his house than his other doctor. And he called me and he said, "Can I come in for a sick visit?" And I said, "Of course you can. You come in right now." And we see people same day. If you come in, if you have an 11 o'clock appointment at My Wellness Express, we see you at 11 o'clock. It's kind of different, right? So Adam calls me, says, "Can I come in?" I said, "Sure." So he comes in the office. He goes, "I'm sorry to, blah, 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 and ask you." I said, no problem. You can come in anytime. He goes, "Well, I was going to go to my other doctor, but when I called there to ask if I can get in, they said you need to wear a mask when you walk in." And he said, "I won't be coming in today." And he says, "You guys are our new practitioners." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry we're a little further, but we would never do that to you." And that's, if you're asking for advice, I think we all need to band together and start firing the people that are going to continue this nonsense. If a store requires you to wear a mask, don't shop there. Send them a message. If we all did that with the plane, that United would have flown every flight. If all of us said, "No, we're not wearing masks," they would have sided with us. The problem is, lady, you've got critical mass in this country, right? And I always wonder what that number is. And I think when you look at what we just did in COVID, there was some deep state, DARPA, somebody had this scenario planned out and they wanted to see how many people would comply. And then COVID was a great, let's just run it and see how it goes. But what's the critical mass? Because if you had a plane full of people and half said we're not wearing these stupid things and half said we are, the half that said we are would outnumber because they had the law on their side at the time. So what is the critical mass? Right. Is it 70-30? Is it 80-20? When it got to a point where too many people were losing money or it was causing that much of a disruption, and that wasn't happening during COVID because the 50% plus more, or whatever the number is in the critical mass, was going along with the scenario. And that was enough to keep it going for almost 3 years. That's pretty scary.
That's right. And we've seen this work. I mean, I even tell my students there's so much power in our purchases. And we've seen this with other companies, whatever, you want to say out there, everyone. But if you don't like it, we've seen this with Bud Light. We've seen this with Disney. We've seen this with Netflix. We've seen this with if you don't like it. In fact, I don't even promote Amazon with your books because with Tony, he told me you go to Skyhorse Publishing and get it from there directly. And I'm like, right, because Amazon even wants to play the game of, are we going to let you sell it? Are we not going to let you sell it? It's like, are you kidding me with this narrative? And I just love that.
I self-published this. I did have an offer from a publisher. I turned him down. And it wasn't anything, malicious. It was just timing wise. They offered me on the second book to publish through them because they like this book a lot, but I self-published. So Amazon helps. It's easier for me. But it's available through, I have another distributor, Ingram Spark. So you can get it through Barnes and Noble. You can get it through Target, Walmart. You just have to Google Fauci's fiction book, but I'd prefer Amazon, believe it or not. It helps with the numbers for us trying to push it out. Amazon's just not cooperating when I want to spend money with them to bump it up. So you might search, right? And then someone else's book is ahead of mine as a sponsored ad. And it's kind of crazy. Like, what current event are you worried about? And you want to add, and it's funny, by the way, when I do an ad on like Facebook for this, the amount of crackpots that come out and say the most vile, nasty, I've had to block hundreds of people on social media, hundreds. It's always someone who never read the book. It's somebody who's making an assumption about this cover. And as soon as they do, and it's not them, but I've had a lot of liberal friends read this book and call me and say, wow, this isn't anything I expected. This was great. This was a lot of good information, stuff we're talking about right now. There's a lot of good information. And I'm like, yeah, well, thanks. You had to get past the cover. I'm glad I did this cover because it's drawing a lot of attention, but at the same time, it turns people off. I don't care. If you really want to know the deal about what practitioners saw on the ground from day one, pick it up. And I'm happy to call, visit. I got people around the country who want me to come do speaking events. I am very receptive. I will talk to you. I will have a conversation with you. I'd love to have new patients come in the office. We'll talk to anybody. I mean, that's who we are. It gets a little old when people who don't read the book want to make comments about it based on what they think is in it. That just shows me that we're not evolving as a country.
No, we're not. I have personally been kicked off of so many different my school has, because I use the tag phrase of all youth are possible. I never thought that would be such a hated sentence in my life. I was like, really? And then I get attacked by that. Well, what do you mean? All youth are possible. I'm like, every single child has the right and the way, they have the ability to go and do whatever they want to. That's what I mean by they're all possible. But then the hate, and it's like, you don't even know what I mean by this, or you haven't even looked into this, where you just think that I am just spouting that one group's better over the other, when I'm saying they're all wonderful, but you have to be able to research. You have to have a critical mind and be able to research for yourself. That's the best way to get through anything, right? Is do your homework, do your reading. And this book is wonderful. It has a lot of great resources for everyone, and information and data that I think that definitely needs to get spread out there. Also, one thing I wanted to say too before we go, and I know that your time is limited. I've held you here a lot longer than you guys have emailed me. Okay, good. Is that you're a comedian? Yeah. I saw that for over something like 20 years. You were a comedian, so I want you to leave us. I know we're talking about some pretty heavy stuff here, but before you leave, after we say where you can find us, if you could leave us with something happy, that would be really great as well.
I can leave you with a COVID joke. If you want. Okay. I've been doing it on stage for a while. My audience has heard it. Am I allowed to curse on this show?
Yeah, you could.
I can say one. All right. Yeah. I don't want to upset your audience. When I'm on stage, a lot of times because we do talk about COVID because it's so prevalent. It's been out there. I'll say, you guys like the masks? And the audience says, no. So why do I still see some of you wearing masks? And they're like, oh, we don't. And I said, yeah. I said, just today I saw a guy on a motorcycle with no helmet, but he had his mask on, which only tells me one thing. This virus ain't killing enough fucking people. That's right. Take the mask off, people. It's not funny. It's stupid. Yeah,
it is stupid.
I've been doing it for 20 years. I have a lot of fun. It's a nice way to get out of the serious. And comedy saved my life during COVID. Comedy Key West. I was down there, and Key West was open while everybody else was closed. And Tom Dustin. I'll give a shout out. Joe Madaus. Nathan Knight, the owners down there, and the booker, they are phenomenal. And I was on stage probably every week, and it was a nice break from the seriousness of all this to get up and do some comedy. So yeah, and I got my own show too. If you see my background, it's 2 Mics Live. My partner Mike Calderese. We're actually going out on Rumble ourselves. You are all inspirations. I do so many of these, and you do such a great show. We want to do our show. Maybe I'll have you on our show one day on 2 Mics Live. That's going to be on Rumble starting next week.
I would love it because, I mean, my thing is I'm worried about our youth. I want them to make sure that they have the foundations of an education to promote any dream that they want to. And we hold them back. And the stuff I'm learning even from second graders right now is I cannot believe what level I have them on in a matter of 3 or 4 months. When they were started out at like a kindergarten kind of level, I have most of my second graders now on a 4th grade level, and it's been 3 or 4 months. It just goes to show you how much we do not do out there. I mean, the public school system's it's another form of suppression. We don't want to actually have them become something great. It just blows my mind. Our government blows my mind.
Are you seeing a lot of the learning curve from COVID, now with the kids who are behind?
Well, they like to blame that on COVID, and I don't think that it helped. But these kids were already a decade behind, at least. I mean, just from the No Kid Left Behind to the Common Core to everything that the government came up with curriculum. I decided to start art integrated curriculum, which is not just color crayons, right? I mean, anything from mathematics and color theory. And I mean, it just taking away and make everything project based to bring retention, make them research, make them open up their minds and take away the fear. I mean, I learned that even just giving them worksheets or doing certain things was like triggering fear. And I'm not here to bash other teachers, but you put 25, 30 kids in one room with one teacher. How does she give them or him? How do they give them the one-on-one attention to actually show that? Then you turn in this worksheet that's empty and you've now failed. What's that tell to our children? So that's just the education aside. Now we're going to mandate that they're going to be on some kind of medication or blockers, or we got to mess with, who they want to be. Do you think that you're a girl or a boy? And I'm not here to say you can't do anything you want to when you're an adult, but let them get to that point so they can make up their own mind. They need to go to school.
Is that, and would you advocate for the dismantling of the Department of Education on the federal level?
Oh, yes. Either I need to take it over or yes.
Right? I mean, those are the two things. The same.
Right. And one of the things that really stopped me is like, I don't even get government grants because I refuse to go by the Title I and the Title IX, which mandates this kind of theory, mandates this kind of curriculum by law. So if you want to take that kind of money, then you have to go by what they mandate. Right. The same thing, like you have to have so many vaccines before your kids can go to school, or you have to, it's like, no. I just want our children to learn how to read, write, and be able to achieve their dreams with firm foundations. And I'm going to find a different way to do that, which I did. And we just started second grade this year, which I'm personally teaching, but it blew my mind by taking off those challenges and just letting them thrive. I was like, wow. I mean, they're just absorbing. It's like learning another language. They always say to teach your children another language from the word go, because they're just full of an ability to absorb, and I have just seen so much failure with that. But then, yeah, again, you're going to mask them up. And that's so important too with facial recognition when you're learning how to pronounce things. And we're going to mask them up. We're going to make them sick. We're going to live in fear. Now we're going to mess with who they think that they are. I'm like, just let them be. So that's my personal hill.
I'm glad you're doing that and taking that upon yourself. I live in a building down in Tampa, my other office down there, and there's a lot of young people, and it's quite comical, even at the college age, for these younger people. You'll step on an elevator and they won't look at you. Their heads buried in their phone. They don't know you exist. They don't say hello. How was your day? They don't acknowledge other people. It's kind of scary. So I'm glad you're taking it upon yourself to do that with their young kids, because the current generation we have now, I'm scared that they're next in line to be running things. Although, with Joe Biden, they might be fourth in line considering his age. So, God bless you for the work you're doing.
And they don't have critical minds to even, think through problems or handle problems. My dad had told me a story about one of his ranking officers that would not have people enlisted. He would watch them salt and pepper their food first. And that was a choice. He's like, I don't want that person on my team. And they're like, because they salt and peppered their food. And he goes, that means that you didn't even research or try something first. Right. You just automatically went and did something without using.
You don't know if it needs it. Right. No, we think a lot alike. It's I see the same thing now. I mean, these kids don't research things. They don't read. They're afraid to talk on the phone. They can't have a conversation. They're so used to texting. Right. It's kind of scary. I'm just, there's a lot of psychology behind that, but you're right. I think COVID made it a lot worse. The education system, the way it's set up now, and what you see, especially at these colleges. We were just talking on another interview today. I was asked from the interviewer about the in Israel, what's going on right now in the MIT and UPenn, and now they're trying to defend the pro-Palestinian groups, because that's the masses at college, I guess now, because they want to be in a club or something and join the mob rather than everything is like a bizarro world. I feel like I'm living in Seinfeld bizarro world right now.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And, it takes a few of us, but luckily this is one of the reasons I started this, because the fear, and my producer was like, I just go, I'm so sick of the news because it's just never anything good. They yell at you to get up and do something, start something, whatever, and then nothing. And they just more fear and more fear, more fear. And I'm like, we're a strong nation. And there are so many people doing great things, writing books or starting programs or whatever that they're doing, creating artwork or, and there's so many great things. And he's like, so you want your own show? And I was like, yeah, thank you. And that started this because I wanted to make sure that people know that we are not alone. You don't live in fear, and there's avenues to get through this mess.
Well, you
So
keep pressing, keep chugging
thank you.
along.
You too. You too. I put in the chats, everyone, so that everyone knows the website here for Dr. Schwartz, that you'll be able to find him. In the permanent chats below, too, is the links to Amazon for his book, the links to his website, the links to, do you have any social media that you would like me to add and tell everyone here how to follow you as well?
I'm on Facebook. I'm old school. I'm on Instagram, mike.schwartz.heroes on Instagram. I don't really use X or Twitter that much. I know I'm a little boring, but you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And then, of course, anybody who does check out the book, if you can go and leave it a review on Amazon, that's a big help. That's how they push their reviews up as well, or push their books out as well. And you get one review for every, 100 people that buy the book, so it's hard to get a review nowadays.
Well, it's like I tell my guests that are here too, liking and sharing this is so important because it's not just so much for me, it's so much for my guests, because we need to get this information out. And we might know it, everyone out there, but there's a lot of people who don't, and we see that it's still around. And you never know when somebody might click onto one of these shows and get educated. And that's what I love about this, is that we went to school today. And thank you so much for teaching these, these things, because this is important. It's not gone. It's still going on, and we're still seeing the ramifications of this. So thank you, Dr. Schwartz, so much. I'm going to share your book here, everyone, again, just so we can see it. It's Fauci's Fiction. I do love the cover. I'm an artist. I love the cover, so that's the great thing. And, again, this is not really about Fauci, but this is exactly about what our government did and how they handled the situation, which was, obviously extremely poor decisions there. So inspiring. One thing to say to everybody to inspire them before you leave.
Oh God. Hard one. I wish I wrote the book before my dad passed, because it might've saved his life. But in lieu of that, I know that we're going to come out of this stronger as a country if we all just stick together, deal with the facts, and we're going to be stronger in years to come. So let's all band together and keep each other's get each other's backs too. You got to watch my 6 and I'll watch yours.
I love it. And tell us your show one more time so people can start following you and watching that. And look into Rumble if you're not on Rumble. Rumble.
We're doing it on Rumble. So on Rumble, it's going to be 2 mics live. It's myself, Mike Schwartz, and Mike Calderese, my partner. And then my podcast is the Mike's Right podcast. And I've had some great guests. I got a lot of cool friends. Tommy John, a future Hall of Famer. I just had Kevin Sorbo on to talk about his new movie. I got a lot of fun friends. I just had Mark White on from the Spin Doctors. He tells a story about how he got kicked out of the Spin Doctors, founding member of the band, for not getting the vaccine. Kind of crazy. I have a lot of great guests on. Mike Calderese is always on my show. That's called the Mike's Right podcast, and 2 Mics Live will be debuting on Wednesday on Rumble. Check it out, and you can tune in, and it'll be live, and you can have a lot of interaction with us.
Beautiful. I know I'm taking notes so that I can put this information down too, so everyone can go and support you. We would love that. And like I said, you're always welcome back on, especially with your new book coming out here too. We definitely want to support that. And I'm really happy, to be honest, that you're not getting banned on Amazon, because I've had several authors on here before that are fighting Amazon because they don't want certain information still out. So let's just say thank you, God, for that they're not doing that to you. So make sure that if you do, when you do, not if you do, when you buy the book, make sure you always leave a great review. Okay. And then please, guys, please like and share this, because we need to get this information out to as many people as possible. So it's absolutely a wonderful pleasure. I'm going to reach out to you. I look forward to reading the rest of your book. I got through most of it, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. So great job there.
My pleasure. Please let me know when you're done. Shoot me a message and let me know what you think. All that feedback really helps. The new book will take a couple more months because we're still doing some research on it, but it's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a very Merry Christmas.
You too. Merry Christmas.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. What a wonderful guest. And this is right. This is just the same thing. I love his idea of we got to fire the people that are not supporting us, right? The ones that are not worried. Thank you very much. I'm looking into the chats. Awesome, everyone. Thank you for putting that out for me. We got to support each other, right? I allowed cursing. Right. Well, I'm on Rumble, everyone. So, I'm going to let my guests tell funny jokes. And we need that. We need to laugh every once in a while, right? We sit here and we live in fear so much that it's time to not do that. It's time to stand up. It's time to be together. It's time to support each other. And this is what I really try to do. Right. I really want to make sure that I'm trying to bring guests to you that are helping us out in this nation. And I love it. So if you guys have people out there, if you're interested in buying this book, this would be a great gift as well. It's a great read. Like I said, I've got through most of it. And I'm looking very forward to reading the rest of it. And I'll let you guys know. But it is really fascinating to see again. And most of us that are probably already here know from, seeing other podcasts and being already here on Rumble and being able to have that freedom to watch. Literally, as we start our interview, I am literally watching these other channels kick us off. So go Rumble. Thank you so much, Rumble, for allowing us to have free speech. But this is very important, and again, that's what science is supposed to be about, breaking that narrative, to research, to study, to find out what's better. And that just definitely did not happen, as we know. Right. And we're still facing that ramification. So that was a great guest. And thank you guys already for posting that into the chats. I posted his website into the chat as well. But we need to take a little minute break here because we have a wonderful sponsor. So if you want to talk about great natural remedies, something else I was going to talk about with inflammation is magnesium. It's something that my doctor had kind of switched up and got me on more of a multivitamin, but you know what? It was a magnesium that really helps me. And he had patients here with inflammation. COVID and those things cause inflammation. Most of our sicknesses cause that. So great things, turmeric and magnesium are wonderful for that. So you guys know how much I promote natural remedies. And you know what my husband says is let thy food be thy medicine. So we're going to have a great moment here from our sponsor because you guys know how much I love honey, and we'll be right back. Here's Be Nourished.
Honey. It's one of the greatest gifts to man. With millions of wildflowers in every bottle, the nourishing power of honey is still yet to be fully discovered. Be Nourished Healing Products combines healing ingredients from around the planet to the purest honey from the island of Maui, to bring magic to your taste buds. The best honey from the most beautiful place to nourish your body, mind, and soul. From our hearts to yours, be nourished.
So I'm totally laughing. Oh, thank you guys. I love it. And it is some of the most greatest honey. You guys know, especially I love that turmeric honey. But I'm reading in the chats. I'm saying hello to everyone, right? And I'm just reading that the litter box is rubbing off on me. That's funny. But I do love some free speech. I really do. And I love Rumble for giving me that. And it was amazing to sit there and watch like DLive and YouTube literally take us off for even mentioning this kind of stuff still with all this stuff that's still going on. Right. It just drives me crazy. So before we leave, macadamia honey. Yes. Oh my gosh. That would be amazing too. I believe that they have one. They even have honeys with like mushrooms and stuff in it too. It's really amazing. But I say this because this honey too was also one that it's more about, medicinal, something that's it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's a special kind of honey. Even though I'm sure it will look great on your allergies and things like that, also get some local honey. That's really important, especially if you're fighting off anything with allergies as well. So stock up on both. And the one from Be Nourished would be a great gift for somebody. And you guys, I go through that turmeric one and I'm surprised. It's just my favorite so far. And I've not tried them all, but I'll tell you what, that one is really, really great. Okay. So we have something to celebrate today. So let me pull that up. We always have something to celebrate on Fridays, right? And I want to get that up here. There we go. Give me a second. We have the artist of the week. So if you guys don't know, I have an amazing group on True Social called the Artist Corner. I love it. It's just getting more and more exciting. And I mean, I'm seeing digital arts, and I got to talk to JJ about that because that's awesome. And I'm seeing cooking, and I'm seeing knitting, and I'm seeing so many great things. I got people sending me stuff, email wise. Leonis, it's got some great stockings. I'm sharing those in the group as well. We've got a Christmas tree challenge going on where people are sharing that, just bringing a wonderful feeling right now in a time where I don't know if you guys are kind of feeling it. I know that, I know this year's kind of weird. I see not too many people, decorating or things like that. So it's kind of got a weird feels to it still, but I am loving that. So thank you guys so much for supporting that group, sharing in that group. It definitely makes my day. I can tell you that. So every week every day we put an artist of the day out. As you guys see, and then you guys vote on it. How do you vote on that? By sharing, by replying, by, liking on that. And that's how we get our votes for this week. So this week's Artist Corner, and let me get this up here. Add this to the stage here. All right, everyone. This is so neat. I've got a few of them that I will share for you here. And I hope I say this right, but it's Mr. Kimori Q. And hopefully I said that right. This is really a one that you guys voted on, and I just absolutely love it. Congratulations for being our Artist of the Week. I am just so thrilled to see you guys there. Please join and go and congratulate him, and make sure that you let him know congratulations. This is really awesome. And then I've got some other pictures. Let's see if that's not the one, but I do love that. I do love that saying. Let me get the other ones on here. All right, do we have that, or did I just close it all? That, let's see, let's put this up here, and it's just me, guys, so just bear with me. Okay, let's cancel. Let's present this. Oh, Mr. Chiori's work is really, really beautiful, as in all of our artists, right? You can definitely go onto their page, and I'll tell you what that is here in a minute, and you can see more of their wonderful artwork. Here is another one here too. And you guys, it's Mr. Chiori Q, and that's on True Social. We got to give a huge congratulations to you. Your artwork is phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and we are so thrilled to share and celebrate with you. So everybody who's in that group, if you're not in that group, go join that group. If you're not an artist, because sometimes we just need a social media cleanse, and I love that, whether it's a prayer or scripture or it's beautiful artwork. And I am absolutely just loving that. So thank you guys so much for being a part of my world that way. It really does make my day. And I love to highlight others. If you guys have not noticed that about me, I am very much into highlighting others. Oh, I'm glad that you guys love that. Oh, Leonis is here. That's awesome. We're just talking about your stockings. I'll be sharing those in the group on True Social as well. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. And that's what I'm saying. Sewing is another art form too, right? And these are just handmade. They're absolutely beautiful. You guys are really amazing. And I think that a lot of people just think that, artwork is just color crayons or painting, and that is not the way. Whether you're writing a book or writing poetry, or you're creating something sculpture wise, painting, or even sewing wise, it's just absolutely beautiful. And I have so many to share. All right, so that being said, again, make sure you go give a huge congratulations to Mr. Kimori Q, and you'll find that, and you see that I've shared that already. Just make sure that you say congratulations on being the artist of our week. And I look forward to seeing what you guys are doing this coming week. I have a video I wanted to share. I was going to talk a little bit about me and my artwork, and so you guys got to know me a little bit, and I got asked if I wanted to have this wonderful guest on today, and I jumped right on it. So I'm glad you enjoyed this guest. We're going to see if this plays, and we're going to see if I don't cry. But this gives you a little bit of glimpse in who Lady Hamilton is and why I created this artwork behind me. So let me see if I can get that loaded up here. I'm going to try. my dangness here. And it's not something I can see when I do it. So hopefully it would just play. And we're going to see. We're going to see. There we go. All right. This is a presentation that I did back after I first got my kids, and I started creating this artwork. Is to learn more about the things that were going wrong, the things that, you know, being trafficked or abused or raped. And, you know, I'm very much a historian artist, and I tell stories about people's tragedies and things like that. And that was because also I adopted 3 children that went through this. My husband and I were foster parents of medically fragile children and became that. And they were like our second, our first set of kids. And after a couple of years of foster care and going through nightmares and things like that, they asked if we wanted to adopt them. But this is something I do, guys. I love to serve. I care so much about our youth. And here I got these 3 little children, and I'm told that they were probably going to die in a matter of weeks. They were so sick. They have a real illness that only 13 people in the world, or the country had, really, really rare, called IFAP. And the extremes that we had to go through, they couldn't fight off any germs whatsoever. We have to bleach down our house every single day. We'd have to put the kids in bleach baths, and 2 years of going through, you know, visitations where it was horrible. One parent would be trying to drug them, the next parent's trying to physically hurt them or assault them. And it was a nightmare, but they changed my life. They really did. It was a very much a blessing. And so when I got to do a presentation and I started a group, and even my nonprofit that holds our school is called the Service of God. But my outlet was to paint their stories and paint other people's stories. That's why they're not flowers and things like that. But I wanted to get out awareness. And so I made this presentation to show people a little bit about what I did and what started me before I even opened this school. So if you want to know a little bit about me, hopefully this plays well and I don't cry, but we're going to try it. All right. So here we go. You guys are the first to see my kids now that they're all grown up and out of here. And I have the, you know, permission. I get to show you a little bit about who they were and the things and the other kids I have helped. So hopefully, everybody say prayer. Let's hope that this goes well. And I'll tell you another time a little bit more about my artwork, but I wanted to at least show you a little bit of an inside to my world. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you don't cry, but it makes me cry. So we're going to try. All right. And let's go.
Daylight, we go undercover with the sun. Got a secret side place, where the streets are empty, that's where we run. Everyday people do everyday things, but I can't be one of them. I know you hear me now. We are a different kind. We can do anything. Anybody's got the power. They don't see it 'cause they don't can't be one of them. I know you hear me now. We are a different kind. We can do anything.
So that's a little bit about who I am. And I hope you guys got to see that. Okay, if you guys get to kind of shout that out, but this is what I do. And it's just so important that we could do something in our communities. We can help each other. Youth are my passion. Youth are my hill. That's what I fight for. And my kids just kind of really ignited that in me to be able to continue to help out. So if you think I care that much, you can imagine why I have my school. And I would love it if, you guys tell others, let people know, because I really am here to do any child know that they are worth it, that they can become whatever they want to. There's a path for them. They are loved. They're not alone, and give them the foundations to go and lead that pathway. But that's what I'm going to start crying. I told you, my kids, I love helping our youth, and we need to do more to support each other, to help each other. Even if youth is not your thing, what are you doing in your community? Go find each other, support each other. And I love having this show that I can do this. If you have a program, or you have an artwork, or you have a cause or whatever, please reach out, because I would love to highlight what you're doing. It makes my day to serve others. Hence why my programs and stuff are called Servicio, or Service of God, because I really believe that. I believe that that is the path to love and serve one another. And that's what I try to do so much. And thank you guys for supporting that. Did not see that. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I was wanting that to play really well, and I apologize if that did not. But I'll share a little bit more of that with you guys. Sunday is going to be a great day. One of my favorite things to make. I was going to do something else, but I thought, what is my favorite thing to make? And it's kind of a little hard going through the holidays now. Being alone, just me and my husband. He's a wonderful husband, don't get me wrong, but not having my kids and having them venture out into their new worlds and things like that. Sometimes it's hard to make these gifts or things that I would make with my kids, but I'm doing much better. And thank you so much for your prayers. But one of my favorite things I forgot about is making bread pudding. So I cannot have the holidays start without showing you guys how to make some bread pudding with some homemade whiskey sauce. So we are doing that on Sunday. So make sure you guys join me Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to share some prayers. We're going to share some scriptures. We're going to share how to make some amazing desserts that you can have for this holiday. I did this so much at the restaurant. I probably will do like a cranberry walnut or cranberry date version of this. But it's one of my favorite things, and it's really easy to do, and it's one of the most popular desserts I ever made at the restaurant. So I hope you guys join me on Sunday for some amazing cooking with me. And let's see. All right. You guys can find me on True Social, and you can find me at Lady Hamilton Art on both there and Facebook, and then Twitter, Lady Hamilton AR1. And I love that you guys were here today. Please remember to like, share, and like, share, or follow if you haven't me already. But when I have wonderful guests like this on, it's so important to share this out so that their voice gets out there, right? And this information gets out there. And I really appreciate you guys so much. You mean the world to me. But this is the end. I'm just kind of making sure that we load this up and check out this. Thank you so much, you guys. I just love you guys too. I really do. And thank you for sharing your wonderful, beautiful Christmas trees with me as well. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. I shared the 4 that I have last Friday. I'll be sharing more. I'll probably load up some of the stockings. I've got so many from Aliona, so we'll share those out next Friday or Sunday as I can, because I love sharing it. You guys' decorations, your handmade trees, your handmade ornaments, you whatever you guys, you're so talented out there, and it's really making my day. And again, I'll say thank you so much for your prayers. You don't know how much I needed those. And I will see everybody Sunday at 12 p.m. We're going to pray for YouTube to play our song out today. It's one of my absolute favorites, and it's probably my favorite version of that. So we're going to try it. All right, everyone. Love to you, and I will see you guys. You know I'm praying for you every single day. So be blessed, and I will see everyone Sunday. Thank you so much for being here.
Let's go. The world getting crazy, baby, chill. Don't medicate, just meditate. Educate, look going on, resonate, accelerate. Find your inner hunger like you never ate. Agenda is to push the hate. Separate and segregate, don't celebrate quite yet. The storm is coming, Q, for heaven's sake. Violence that they demonstrate, instigate and penetrate the values of our country. And our God is what they desecrate. My fighters ain't no featherweight, pulling out the seams of the fabric that they fabricate. They feed us lies, manipulate, intimidate through fear and force, forcing us to sit and wait till we come together, congregate, and then we liberate. Praying that you give me strength to find some love amongst the hate. Marching on the streets of blood till I see the golden gates. Troubadour, troubled souls, one of God's servants. Blades out, cut the grass till we see the serpents.
Oh, one day I hope you see the truth. This puppet show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with lies and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
I know the truth is hard to swallow, just digest it. Suspected something's going on, chosen, just neglected, deflected by some breaking news. Oh, we just accept it, expected just to fall in line and follow their perspective. Don't question their objectives, but I got a lot of questions. How these kids molested, but nobody's been arrested. Read it in the testament, these children are protected. So I'm fighting all these terrorists, both foreign and domestic. Refuse to be directed, lying not a sheep. Only kneel to my God, so I'm dying on my feet. Silence when we speak, but there's violence in the street. I've been rolling with the punches, I can't take it on the cheap. Nah, drink from a glass half full, I'm optimistic. People are sadistic, so vicious and malicious. Praying for assistance to overcome opposition, or I'm gonna start resisting, and then I'll pray for forgiveness.
Oh, one day I hope you see the truth. This puppet show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. Need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now. We need you now. We need you now. One day, one day, one day, I hope you see the truth. This puppet show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. Need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.